I was adjusting the cuff of my silk blouse when my phone buzzed again, an insistent, sharp vibration that seemed to echo against the glass walls of my corner office. From this height, the city looked like a model train set, orderly, glowing, utterly indifferent to human drama below. I ran my fingers through my hair, careful to smooth the slight frizz that always appeared under stress, and tried to ignore the small, familiar pang of dread that accompanied every unexpected call from home. It was my mother. I hadn't answered the last two, and part of me wanted to continue ignoring her, but curiosity, or maybe a stubborn, unacknowledged part of longing, won. With a deep breath, I swiped to accept. "Claire, we need to talk." Her voice trembled, soft and hesitant. It was nothing like the crisp, demanding tone that had marked most of our conversations when I was younger. My chest tightened as memories surged. The silent wedding aisle where they weren't, the cold, rehearsed smiles they'd shown to everyone else, the empty chairs that had been meant for them. My hands clenched the smooth leather of my chair, knuckles whitening, as irony curled bitterly in my stomach. They had skipped my wedding because I had married before my sister, the one they always called their golden child, the one whose life seemed planned for perfection while mine had been inconvenient. Yet here I was, 10 years later, living in a high-rise I'd earned, running a business I had built from nothing, and feeling that old, familiar tension pull me backward like tidewater against the shore. I let out a slow breath, feeling the silk beneath my fingers, the hum of the office, and the weight of a conversation I didn't know I was ready to remember that day so clearly, as if it were etched into the very corners of my memory. I was 24, freshly graduated, and bursting with dreams too big for the small town I'd grown up in. I had fallen in love, truly, wholly, and decided to marry him, despite the murmurs and the heavy sighs from my parents. "You're rushing," my mother had said, her voice tight with irritation, while my father simply shook his head, his disappointment radiating like a cold draft. But the truth wasn't just about timing, it was about hierarchy. My sister, Emily, was the golden one, the flawless child whose achievements were already being showcased like trophies. And I had dared to step out of line, to claim happiness before her, to write a story they hadn't pre-approved. The wedding day itself had been a quiet battlefield. My grandparents sat proudly, yes, but my parents were conspicuously absent. My friends whispered apologies and shrugged helplessly, and I forced a smile, pretending the empty seats didn't sting. When the officiant asked if anyone objected, I half-wished someone would, anything to validate the tumult roiling inside me. But no one did, because the silence of their absence was louder than words. Before I left the house that morning, my grandmother handed me a small, silver locket. "This is for you, Claire," she said, pressing it into my hand. "It's not about their approval. It's about your strength." I could feel the cool metal against my palm, a comforting weight, as if she had somehow packed her love and faith into it. Her eyes glistened, and for a fleeting moment, I saw her belief in me outshine the shadows of disappointment. That night, as I walked down the aisle without my parents beside me, my hands shook, not from nerves, but from the surge of grief and determination intermingled. I had loved deeply, and I had chosen boldly, even though it meant standing alone. That decision, painful, defiant, unwavering, was the first brick in the foundation of the life I would eventually build. Even then, I understood something crucial. The people who refuse to show up don't get to decide the worth of the life you create. After the wedding, life demanded more than just healing. It demanded action. I moved to New York with nothing but a small suitcase, the silver locket tucked close to my heart, and a head full of ideas. The first apartment I found was tiny, with cracked tiles and a view of the brick wall next door, but to me, it felt like freedom. Every step away from my hometown and my parents' disapproval was a step toward building the life I deserved. I started at a modest marketing firm, answering phones, making coffee, and taking notes like a shadow at the edges of every meeting. My mentor, a sharp, fearless woman named Veronica, spotted something in me that I hadn't fully recognized yet: persistence. "Don't let anyone define your worth, Claire," she told me one late night over stale takeout. "Your story isn't theirs to control. I clung to her words like a lifeline. The nights were long, the doubts constant. I would lie awake in my tiny apartment, the locket cold against my skin, and wonder if I had made the right choice. There were moments I wanted to give up, when clients said no, or projects failed, or I felt invisible. But each small win, landing my first client, making my first profitable pitch, signing the contract that finally put me above the paycheck-to-paycheck life, was a secret triumph I carried quietly, savoring it in the solitude of my new independence. I learned the power of discretion. Every post on social media was carefully curated. My parents couldn't know, nor could anyone else who had doubted me. They thought I was struggling in obscurity, but I was quietly building an empire, one late night and early morning at a time. I painted my apartment with colors I loved, hung art that inspired me, and cultivated a circle of friends who lifted rather than judged. Success, I realized, wasn't about showing off. It was about claiming control over your own story. There were hard lessons, too. Money alone couldn't erase loneliness, and independence didn't shield me from the ache of family disappointment. But the silver locket on my dresser was a constant reminder. Strength isn't the absence of pain. It's the courage to grow in spite of it. And I was growing, inch by painstaking inch, shaping a life that belonged entirely to me, a life my parents hadn't expected and certainly hadn't imagined. I hadn't expected them to show up unannounced, yet there they were, my parents, standing hesitantly in the doorway of my office, Emily trailing behind with that perfect, practiced smile. I let them take in the space before I spoke. Floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city skyline, walls adorned with contemporary art I had handpicked, shelves lined with awards and framed articles highlighting achievements they had never believed I could reach. My desk, polished and commanding, was a quiet testament to the life I had quietly built. "Claire," my mother started, her voice faltering, the rigid composure she always wore slipping. We just wanted to see." I raised a hand, cutting her off with a calm that surprised even me. "You wanted to see? Or you wanted to understand?" My tone was steady, even, but underneath lay the full weight of 10 years of absence, disappointment, and the relentless drive that had carried me here. Emily shifted, a little uneasy. "Claire, I smiled gently, though it didn't reach my eyes. "Let me show you something." I gestured to the portfolio on my desk. "This is the company I started from scratch. That first client you didn't think I could handle? The contracts I signed while juggling 10 other jobs? The business that now employs over 100 people? All of it is mine. And yes," I added, letting the words linger like a carefully measured echo, "I did it without your approval, without your guidance, without your presence on my wedding day." The silence that followed was almost tangible. My father's jaw tightened. He glanced at my mother, eyes flickering with a mix of shame and disbelief. Emily, the golden child, who had been so carefully polished for public adoration, now looked genuinely unsettled. They had expected a timid, struggling version of me, the daughter who needed them. Instead, they were confronted with the woman who had not just survived, but flourished. I leaned back slightly, letting the moment stretch. "I am not angry anymore," I said softly, though the edge of my voice carried decades of unspoken frustration. "I am disappointed that you didn't show up when it mattered most. But I am proud of myself because I chose to move forward, to create a life that wasn't dependent on anyone's approval." My mother's lips trembled. My father's hands fidgeted. Emily swallowed hard, the carefully maintained veneer cracking just enough to show a hint of vulnerability. I could see the realization settling in. I had become everything they had underestimated, every doubt they had cast aside, every dismissal they had handed me. They had fueled it. And yet, in that moment, I understood something profound. Power isn't in revenge. It's in showing up fully, unapologetically, in your own truth. I didn't need them to recognize it yet, not fully. The evidence of my life, my work, my triumphs, they were undeniable. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely, unshakably in control. After the initial shock settled over them like dust in a sunbeam, I felt a subtle shift in the room. For the first time, I held the balance. The years of absence, the slights, the dismissals, they didn't define me anymore. I could choose how much of my world they would step into, and under what terms. "I'll help," I said, my voice calm but firm. "But this isn't just about business. It's about respect, about growth, about the relationships you neglected for years." I paused, letting my words sink in. My mother's eyes were wide, my father's mouth slightly open, Emily's posture stiff with disbelief. "These are the conditions," I continued. "First, honesty. No more half-truths, no more excuses. I want transparency in everything we discuss from this point forward. Second, effort. If you want a place in my life, in my business, you need to work for it, show commitment to your own goals, not just mine. Third, respect. For me, for my achievements, and for the boundaries I've set." I could see their expressions shift slowly, my parents, accustomed to wielding authority, struggling with the reversal. Emily, whose entire existence had been framed by perfection, finally looked unsure of herself. I let a small, controlled smile touch my lips. "This isn't punishment. It's an opportunity," I said. "To heal old wounds, to rebuild trust, and to become the people you should have been all along, not just for me, but for yourselves." My mother's voice trembled. "Claire, we—" "Not yet," I interrupted softly. "Actions, not words. Show me that you've changed, that you understand what it means to value someone other than yourselves. Until then, I will continue my life as I have built it, successful, independent, and proud." I glanced at Emily, whose eyes darted nervously to the floor. "And Emily," I added softer now, "being the golden child isn't a free pass. You have your own life to craft, your own choices to make. Learn to stand on your own. Learn to respect others' journeys, not just expect the world to revolve around yours." The room was quiet, the weight of the conditions settling like a palpable fog. For the first time, I saw them not as my parents or my sister in their roles of judgment, but as people, flawed, human, capable of change if they were willing to meet me halfway. I felt a surge of relief, tempered with pride. I was no longer the child waiting for approval. I was the woman setting the terms, defining the rules, and protecting the life I had fought to build. This power wasn't vindictive. It was deliberate. It was compassionate but firm. And for the first time in a long time, I felt that the future wasn't just mine to hold, it was mine to shape. Weeks passed after that meeting, and slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, I saw changes. My parents began showing up, not just physically, but with effort, listening instead of judging, asking questions without the weight of expectation. My mother enrolled in a professional course she had postponed for years, and my father took up volunteering at a local charity, something he had always dismissed as trivial. Emily, quiet at first, started taking ownership of her own ambitions, rather than living in the shadow of the golden child image. I watched them grow from the sidelines, allowing myself both relief and satisfaction. I still wore the silver locket my grandmother had given me, its smooth surface reflecting the sunlight in my office, a reminder that strength isn't granted, it's earned. That small piece of metal had guided me through heartbreak, absence, and doubt. It had reminded me that my life was mine to build, that love and support could come from unexpected places, and that independence was more powerful than resentment. Sitting at my desk one quiet morning, I realized how far I had come. The pain of being overlooked, the sting of skipped weddings and empty chairs, the long nights of effort and self-doubt, they had all led me here. To a place where I was not only successful, but whole. Where I had a voice, a presence, and the power to influence the world around me, not by seeking approval, but by embodying it through action. I took a deep breath, the hum of the city beneath me a steady, comforting pulse, and smiled. For the first time, I felt a complete sense of closure. The people I once needed to validate me were no longer gatekeepers of my happiness. They were participants in a new chapter, one where I set the tone and defined the rules. And in that moment, with the locket warm against my chest, I whispered to myself, almost as a vow, almost as a celebration, I married my life first, and now nothing, no absence, no doubt, no judgment, can ever take that from me. Bottom of form.